who I was as a person, to realize that one of the greatest things, and one of the things that I eventually came to admire of all my geek childhood companions, was that they were really unapologetic about it. You know, even at 10 years old, they were like, listen, Spock is hot. And I want to fly that spaceship thing, and it's awesome, and you may make fun of me, and you may not invite me to your parties, but this is who I am. And I think that that's something to take away from you even as an adult, to just be unapologetically who you are.
My very popular sister has recently come out as loving Doctor Who, and it's just fascinating. Seeing how various aspects of geekery have gotten normalized recently, and like what is now, like it's totally okay to like Doctor Who, even if you are one of the popular girls, right? And it's gonna go elsewhere, right? I mean, you can kind of see that she's leaning towards other genres. Yeah.
I'll tell you that World of Warcraft was my gateway drug. Yeah, it was my gateway drug. A friend of mine introduced me to it. You were talking about Sims earlier, and Sims was like the first video game I'd ever played, and it was the coolest thing ever. And the way that he described it to me was, he's like, it's like Sims but with more violence. And I was like, violence? Yes! And you know, I signed on, and you know, talking about sort of gender and the female stereotypes, I signed on, and the two options were to play Alliance and to play Horde. And I saw the Alliance girls, and they reminded me of all these girls that I would see as I was getting into the geek culture, that would dress really slutty, and that would play up their damsel in distress to sort of attract the male attention. And I was like, I don't want to be that kind of person. I want to be the girl that kicks all the ass. So I did a troll rogue was my first character, and I kicked all ass. And so I think that that was so interesting, because even as World of Warcraft is a reference in particular, the armor, at least at the beginning of what was vanilla WoW, the armor on a Horde character was very different than the armor on an Alliance character, especially like on the Night Elves. They were very scantily clad. There was like gold bomb. That's all you need.
3 pieces of chainmail and some leather don't make armor?
No. You know what though? But it makes for a good Friday night.
Oh.
Well, yeah, but like that, yeah, that sounds like a costume that you'd have in, like, say, a burlesque show. I mean, like, I know that Gorilla Tango has done, there was the Fellowship of the Boobs, and they were doing Super Mario Brothers burlesque.
Well, I think that, you know, I actually take the, you know, I love Gorilla Tango, disclaimer, I'm in the burlesque world, I love Gorilla Tango as a whole. But I do take issue with the fact that I feel that they're exploiting women. Because they, first of all, the performers in a typical Gorilla Tango show are not actual burlesque performers. You won't really ever see them perform outside of that show. They're actresses who strip for the role. And that's fine. You know, that's a thing, that's a choice. But I feel that there is that bit of exploitation of women, because of the majority of their audiences at a Gorilla Tango show are 90% men. If you come to a regular burlesque show, easily 75% of the audience will be women. So there is that distinction between, while they're playing up, they're feeding into that stereotype of women who are not powerful characters in this nerd world, but rather they are there to look pretty and take their clothes off for you.
So I guess that's actually kind of like something to go deep into the segue into. Like, so for all of us who, like, really, like, being a geek is a really huge part of who we are. Like, how do you look at reconciling, you know, the imagery of women as they tend to be portrayed in geek culture versus like how you feel, what your identity is as a woman? Like, how do you go about reconciling a lot of these different aspects that we see, like, are constantly coming up and butting heads, like the difference between being sexy or being sexually objectified? And like, I don't know who wants to take that one first.
I'll take a crack at it. I guess even though I grew up as a nerd, and Disclaimer here, I wasn't raised in this country. I was raised in India until I was about 10. And so when I came here, I discovered I was a nerd just kind of by accident, more so than anything else. And seeing all these displays of women that were scantily clad and all these objectifications, I never identified with it, so it never impacted me. I never thought, oh, I'm a nerd girl, so I should dress like this and this will really give me cred or anything like that. You know, I just kind of ignored it back to reading. So
I mean, you know, when I was 12, I went to my first science fiction convention. My dad took me to a Star Trek mini-con. Again, having no idea what it was, right? So I was 12, and he dropped me off for a couple of hours, and I think underneath one of the dealer's tables, I found a box of fan stuff, and I started reading it. It was like Slash, and so that was probably formative, but I think I think you have to take it back to power, right? Because, you know, like, if I am, you know, I wanted to wear a chainmail bikini back then, and I didn't have the nerve to do it, right? And I fully support. I saw a lovely woman earlier today in the tiny micro Star Trek gold command uniform. I don't know who she was. She was at one of the booths, but I mean, it was very minimal and lovely. And I think there can be an appreciation of sexuality, right, and beauty, and I think that should be okay. And I think you know, I enjoy a man in a kilt and other scantily clad items, and so I think there is. I think where it gets problematic is where you make this leap from, like, there's a really hot booth babe, now I get to grope her, or, you know, whatever else, right? It's this that assumption that because someone has chosen to dress in a certain way, that implies a whole set of other power dynamics.
I think a lot like what you said about identifying with Spock, most of the characters that I always identified with the most were male characters, but they were the characters that knew who they were, owned who they were, and made no apologies about who they were. And so, as in my geek culture growing up, those were the characters that I was like, I want to be like that. You know, I don't want to be the simpering girl who needs someone to come rescue her. I want to be the person who comes in and knows who they are. It's like, this is who I am. Deal with it and make stuff happen. And so, I don't know that I ever looked at the, you know, scantily clad girls and went, oh, she's hot, and guys will like me if I'm hot like that. It was, I want to have that personality where I can walk into a room and go, fuck you, I'm awesome. You know,
Goal accomplished.
I want to be Kirk and walk in and have the blue chick come up and want to bang me. That's the personality that I admired in sci-fi and in the reading and in my books and things like that, and that's what I wanted to take away from it. But then I found when I got into college, it's really because I went to a performing arts high school where everybody was all sorts of special, like picture famous high school, like I went to that, like amazing, but it was nowhere like normal. So then I get to college in this tiny town in Indiana, and I come into this environment where I'm this geek and I totally know who I am and I own it, and I either have guys go, oh my god, that's so hot, you're sexy because you're nerdy, or they go, you're not a girl because you're nerdy. I actually had one of my guy friends come up to me at a point, and yeah, there was drinking involved, but the conversation ended up with him saying, you know, I don't really think you've got girl parts, I'm pretty sure you've got a dick under there. Because I wasn't girly enough to be considered a girl, which really pissed me off, because it's like, I can be assertive and I can be me and still be girly without having to go to the polar opposite of chainmail bikinis and damsel in distress.
Well, I guess that's the question then, is that because it's really interesting that you bring up identifying with male characters, again, like, you know, Spock and Kirk. So what does that say to you guys about the fact that there weren't, like, do you feel like there was a dearth of strong female characters who you could identify with in geek culture, in science fiction, in fantasy, like, was that how you
Yes.
felt when you first
Yeah.
started? Like,
Yeah.
So there's always Xena.
And Tank Girl.
Tank Girl, yeah, always
Yeah,
have Tank Girl.
Xena and Buffy are more recent, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I remember Podkane of Mars, and Heinlein is, I have a love hate.
That guy knows.
love hate, but at least she was a girl protagonist, and she was the first I'd seen, you know, and it was shocking. And then she was, again, like for years, there wasn't another one, right? I mean, there was a long stretch, so.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's a different world.
Yeah, and I never understood the damsel in distress. Growing up, my hero was, I don't know how many opera fans we have. Yeah! Alright! So, when I was 10 years old at the Lyric Opera, I saw Carmen for the first time. Okay, cool. And it was the first time I'd ever seen a woman of any color other than white on the stage being manipulative and crazy, but being independent and being strong and knowing what she wanted. And my thought as a 10-year-old girl was like, yes, this is who I need to be. And so when I was exposed to more pop culture things, I never really understood how women could ever relate to being helpless. You know, how they could want that, and why helpless is represented with a lack of clothing. You know, it's like
vulnerability.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's an implied
But you can be vulnerable with all your clothes on.
It's easy to be vulnerable when you have no pants.
Jumping off of a couple of those things.
Speaking of no clothes, Dawn.
I dance half naked on a regular basis in front of people. So the belly dancing. There's two kind